As soon as you start, I'll start.
Picture a euphoric time in Vancouver. It was just last year where we successfully hosted the Winter 2010 Olympic Games. Vancouver is really sitting on the world stage. And earlier this week, June 15th, the Vancouver Canucks had the opportunity to play in the final game of the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, this is one of the most prestigious championship games there is in sports. It was really an opportunity because the last time we had a chance at this was 17 years ago in 1994. The stakes were very, very high. Upwards of 200,000 people made it to the city center in downtown Vancouver. What was supposed to be a night of celebration quickly spiraled out of control and turned into a night of mayhem. The city was ablaze. Mass destruction, a riot gone completely out of control. Vancouver didn't realize what was at stake was its reputation. And that night we lost our dignity. The main difference here is really the role of social media. This new reality and emergence of social media really had an impact on these particular riots because the world was updated instantaneously. And that is the reality that RightTech Construction is facing today. And right now, we're here today to help the company protect its reputational capital and ensure a sustainable future. Because in reality, if you make customers unhappy in the physical world, they might tell 6 friends. However, if you make customers unhappy on the internet, they can each tell 6,000 friends. My name is Fahad Yassin, and I'm from Dark Horse Consulting, and these are my colleagues Sasha, Christine, Andrew, and Moira. Over the next 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to be walking you through exactly what is important to RightTech Construction and what happened the night of the riots and the morning following in this ethical decision that we have in front of us. We're also going to walk you through our decision analysis, which includes the legal, financial, and ethical implications of the decision at hand, and provide you with a recommendation that is sustainable. Now, we want to understand what's important to RightTech Construction as a company. This is the foundation for our decision. You are part of the construction and commercial concrete industry based in the city of Delta, and you have been in operation successfully for about 10 years, operating in both British Columbia and Alberta. Now, we want to consider your core competencies in our decision. Loyalty to your consumers and loyalty with your employees, as well as the quality and service that you offer to your clientele. We wanted to ensure we took this into consideration when making our decision, and to ensure we follow your mission, which is striving to achieve excellence and diversity in the concrete formation industry. Now, we used all of this to come up with our primary objectives for our recommendation. And the first is to preserve your reputation. This is of utmost importance in moving forward. And secondly, we want to minimize any risk RightTech Construction is facing. The ethical decision at hand provides a very risky environment. And we know just last year, you underwent a project failure. Now this took a hit to your finances, and we want to be really certain that moving forward that we consider the alternative that is provides the least risk, so we have a financially sustainable solution. Now, it's important to understand what exactly happened during the riots. Now, RightTech Construction, we understand your employee, Connor McAlvena, had a role within the riots. And the morning following the riots last week, you received upwards of 100 emails in your inbox, 30 of which contained this screenshot from Connor McAlvena's Facebook page. Now, if you can see here, it lists RightTech Construction as his employer, alongside his pro-riot Facebook status updates, stating things such as, Vancouver needed remodeling anyway. Attaboy Event City, show them how we do it. Now, this led to severe public scrutiny. And now, under the public eye, we have the opportunity to make a change and move forward into a sustainable future. Now, like I said already, we don't know McAlvena's exact role in the riots. What was his participation and his actions? We don't exactly know. However, we do know that the morning following the riots, he sat in his office with you and admitted to the pro-riot Facebook status updates. Now, that's information we have for certain. Now, taking a step back, we also consider it's very important to understand the operation of your company within competition and in the industry. Now, the construction industry has gone under phenomenal growth for particular reasons, such as high demand housing, increased population, and robust economic conditions. Now, what this means is you're operating in an environment of stiff competition. And what really we want to take into account is differentiation is very important, especially a construction company of small size as yours, because there are so many other competitors just like yours. Now, we're in the public eye, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to differentiate yourself with our strategy and recommendation. And I'll pass it on to Sasha, who's going to walk you through our stakeholders.
So, in addition to analyzing certain external factors, such as the state of the construction industry and your competition, and helping us reach a solution that is not only legal and ethical, but also makes sound business sense for your company, it is imperative, in a case as sensitive as this, with numerous potential legal, financial, and ethical implications, that you consider all of those individuals and organizations which may affect or be affected by the decision that you make. And it is because of this that we have conducted an in-depth stakeholder analysis, and we'll be highlighting here for you today the 5 primary and secondary stakeholders which we believe you must consider. First and foremost, of course, is your company, Right Tech Construction. Now, you're under enormous pressure to take action against Connor's poor judgment in order to protect your reputational capital. And what we really mean by this are your intangible assets. So things such as your company image, customer perceptions, your reputation for ethics and integrity, and your collaboration and contribution to the community, all of which together help build a sustainable, long-term competitive advantage. Next, the central individual in this case, and the primary reason for your dilemma, is Connor, whose own employment, reputation, and future career are at stake because of his online posts supporting riotous behavior, his shameful lack of conscience and moral reasoning which led to these posts, and his decision to head downtown after the riot act had been read. Third is your remaining employees at Right Tech Construction, for whom a precedent will undeniably be set regarding what is acceptable and unacceptable future behavior based on any decision that you make here today. Now, what will be of utmost importance will be that you maintain a balance between maintaining employee morale, but also being clear about your organizational values, your integrity, and your expectations for future conduct. And as will become clear throughout the rest of our presentation, a secondary goal here today will be to develop a risk mitigating strategy, a strategy that will mitigate the risk for hiring high-risk individuals such as Connor in the future, because having an employee like this on your payroll reflects poorly on your company, and in fact threatens the survival of your business. Furthermore, one of the most important groups to consider will be your current and potential clientele. Now, as Fahad mentioned, immediately following Connor's Facebook posts, and as a result of his publicly visible link to your company, you received over 100 scathing emails, some of which threatened to boycott Red Tech if Connor's actions were not dealt with quickly and appropriately. Now, it's very unfortunate that you're in this situation, where the reality is that the shameful and unethical conduct of one employee is now threatening your last decade of work and all that you've overcome to build a successful company. But please remember that this is why we are here, in order to guide you in coming up with a solution to move forward in a manner such that you will be able to maintain, even strengthen your reputational capital and avoid further fallout. Finally, the media. You're well aware of the extensive global coverage that this event received, as well as the enormous public outcry right here at home in Vancouver. You can expect further extensive coverage and publicity in news and social media regarding any decision of termination you make based on Connor's online association with the riots. Now, please remember that there is a clear public consensus that Connor should be terminated. All of this brings us to our central ethical dilemma. Is it truly justified for Right Tech Construction to terminate Connor's employment based on his social media misuse causing negative publicity? And the good news is, you have an opportunity to move forward, and as I said, to maintain, even strengthen your reputational capital. We have analyzed 3 alternative solutions. Number 1 is immediate termination. That is taking the quickest response to public outcry and terminating Connor immediately in order to avoid any further damage to your reputation. Number 2 is due process with termination. That is ensuring that due diligence and care is taken in the process of terminating Connor, which may somewhat sacrifice the speed of your response. However, it will allow you to analyze the full extent of the situation and develop a risk mitigating strategy moving forward. Number 3, temporary suspension and the possibility of alternative remediation. Now, this is perhaps the most lenient approach, but it certainly puts Connor's well-being into the forefront. These 3 alternatives will be evaluated through a 3-pronged legal, financial, and ethical approach. Now, our 3 alternatives are presented at the top of the decision diagram which you see, which we will be referring to constantly throughout the presentation. And as we walk you through the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the case, we will explain exactly why our recommendation is that you choose due process and terminate Connor without cause. Now please keep in mind that although there is enormous public outrage and the idea that Connor should be terminated immediately, this is exactly the kind of responsive vigilantism that we're trying to avoid, because that represents merely a short-term, unilateral solution to what is truly a multilateral issue. It also does not mitigate the risks of potentially enormously time-consuming and costly litigation in the future. Also, from an ethical perspective, consider the fact that Connor did not have an existing contract stipulating social media use guidelines. He did not have an employee code of ethics to follow, and in fact, he was a valued member of your team who had not committed any previous wrongs, and thus deserves due care. I will pass it on to Christine, who will analyze the legal implications of our remaining two alternatives.
So Section 13 of the BC Human Rights Code states that an employer cannot refuse to continue to employ a person because that person has been convicted of a criminal or a summary conviction that is unrelated to the employment or the intended employment of that person. Now, what does that mean? Well, from his Facebook posts, we know that Connor admitted to these the status updates. However, he denies rioting. He only places himself at the scene of the crime rather than merely actively participating in it. Furthermore, if there was a clear connection between his role in the riots, Crown Counsel would have arrested him and laid charges by now. However, this is not the case. And for this reason, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom states that any person that is charged with an offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And in that standpoint, RightTech is not cannot make the decision right now. So based on the fact that the crime is in question, we cannot suspend and remediate Connor, and we cannot terminate him with cause under this law. So let's look at a couple of precedent cases. The first one that comes to mind is Woodward Stores versus McCartney. Now, Mr. McCartney was employed with Woodward Stores. He was later dismissed based on the employer finding out of a prior conviction he had with shoplifting. Now, the most important fact to take from this is the relatedness test that the judge applied in this case. The first test is, does the behavior for which the charge is laid, if repeated, pose threat to RightTech's future viability? And the second test is, what were the circumstances related to the charge? Now, we've already established that no charges have been laid at this point in time. However, the circumstances surrounding this is what may have seemed unethical and immoral on an objective standpoint was fueled by mob mentality. Furthermore, we know that Connor's Facebook profile is public and that you have received emails threatening to put your company on the boycott list, and this does pose threat to your future viability. But the relatedness test does not clearly apply to the RightTech construction. So let's look at another case. EV Logistics versus Retail Wholesale Union. An employee of EV Logistics maintained a public blog where he listed his employer on his blog and made racial comments. He was initially dismissed, and then later as the case went through court, he was given disciplinary suspension. Now, the most important fact to take away from this case is the comment that the Canadian Bar Association made. Discipline is likely warranted where an employee's use of the internet, blogs, social media results in the harassment or defamation of management. Now, this leads us to question, to what degree did Connor's actions lead to the harassment or defamation of management? This is definitely a gray area that can be argued in a court of law. So for these reasons, the precedent cases doesn't give us clear grounds to dismiss him on just cause. So let's look at the BC Employment Standards Act, specifically due process and termination. With this alternative, you have two options. You can terminate Connor with just cause or without just cause. With just cause, when you choose to terminate him, you do not need to provide notice and no severance needs to be given. However, if there is no just cause, upon termination, you must provide a written notice that is parallel to their years of service to your firm in lieu of a service package, a severance package. So this leads us to question, what is just cause? Now, in order for there to be just cause, these two conditions need to be met. And if the employee's actions can be proven, you do have just cause for dismissal. However, if at least one of these conditions are not met, you do not have just cause, and you do need to provide a notice of termination. So for this reason, we cannot terminate Connor under the BC Employment Standards Act with cause. Now let's look at the Canadian Criminal Code. Under the Riot Act, Section 368, it says that everyone who takes part in the riot is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment not exceeding a period of 2 years. So, although RightTech can anticipate that if Crown Counsel lays these charges, he will be absent for a period of 2 years from his employment, which gives you the reason to dismiss him on just cause. However, this is way too risky. For you to wait this long until the case goes to court and the legal proceedings, and until the judgment is given, that may be too much time to damage your reputational capital. And for this reason, the Canadian Criminal Code does not give us just cause to fire him. Now, Andrew will continue talking about the ethical and the financial dimensions of the alternatives available.
So moving forward into our financial analysis, you can see that the first thing we've got up here is status quo, which would mean keeping Connor on your current payroll and him remaining as an employee. This is associated with potential reputational loss of your company, as well as the loss of future clients, which would also result in the loss of future revenues. So there's too much risk associated with this. Now there's termination with cause, which also carries a lot of risk, based on the fact that Connor could come back and decide to sue you for wrongful dismissal. Now, regardless of whether or not you're successful in court, the legal fees that are associated with this process would be huge, and there's just far too much risk as to whether you would be successful or not, and whether this is even an option. This leaves us with one last option, and that's termination without just cause. This involves paying out a severance package of $2,000 to Connor, while still allowing you to terminate Connor at the same time. So as you can see, based on our legal analysis, the only viable option is termination without just cause. Moving on to our ethical analysis. We understand that this is a very difficult case for you to be handling because there are so many people that are involved. Now, to simplify this, we picked out the two primary stakeholders, yourself, RightTech Construction, as well as Connor McIlvena. These are the two people that are going to be most affected with whatever decision you make at the end of the day. So first, we're going to be looking at the harm against yourselves, RightTech Construction. This involves harm against your reputation, which relates to the potential loss of current or future clientele, and of course that also relates to your current and future earnings. Now, Connor's reputation is also at stake, and this is not just his reputation, but as well as his family from things like public shaming. And another thing to keep in mind is that when Connor looks for a new job, how will the events and the decisions that you make affect his ability to find employment in the future? So, to break it down into even simpler terms, you are being faced with a very difficult decision today. This decision is extremely difficult based on a couple of items. The first is, while Christine mentioned there are some precedent cases relating to social media is such a new phenomenon, and we're still determining what is the best way to use it. So because of this, we don't really know how a court case would go, and so it's very difficult to say whether the court case might go one way or another way if it were to come down to a wrongful dismissal trial. The next difficult factor is that whatever decision you make, it will be speculated and ridiculed by the public. It's going to show up in the media. People are going to be talking about it at work, at home, everywhere. So this is a very important decision to be making. Now, we've also done an analysis of Connor. Connor has allegedly made an unlawful decision, and it's not up to us or to you to decide whether Connor is guilty or innocent of his rioting behavior. But what we do need to keep in mind today is the fact that Connor did make those pro-riot Facebook statuses. And because of this, it really puts his values and his morals into question. And you need to ask yourself this question. Do you want RightTech's morals and RightTech's values to be aligned with that of a pro-rioter such as Connor McIlvena? So, as Sasha mentioned earlier, it's up to you to make a multilateral decision. And the best way to do that is to maintain a balance, and that's a balance between all of your stakeholders. As I mentioned, there are many people involved, and your decision will affect all of them. So, immediate termination is out of the picture because you've already come to us, you've already started your due diligence. So that's not even an issue or question here today. Now, suspension and remediation is also a very plausible idea. However, it really ignores two major issues, and that's the fact that it ignores most of your stakeholders, which are employees. It really sets a precedent that if an employee is out of line and does something wrong, there's just a minor slap in the wrist. It also ignores your community and the public at large, as well as your customers, and whether they want to be dealing with a company that has a provider on their staff. The other problem with remediation is the fact that Connor hasn't actually admitted to his rioting. He's only admitted to the statuses. So how are you going to put someone in counseling who isn't even a rioter? This leaves us with one last choice based on our ethical decision, and that is termination without just cause. So we can eliminate suspension and remediation from the picture. As you can see, this due process with termination is your only decision in our opinion, and our recommendation is formed around this. While we have already gone over the legal, the financial, and the ethical analysis, it's also very important to us that we incorporate your sustainability as well as your values. So we've just selected the recommendation with the least amount of risk. Now, while still being able to uphold your company's reputation, terminating Connor's employment without just cause carries the least amount of risk. Today, what we've actually done for you is not only solve the problem of Connor McIlvena, but we've actually eliminated this problem from happening in our recommendation. And even beyond that, we're going to show you how you can actually grow your goodwill and your reputational capital. And to actually go through this process with you and explain our implementation will be Mara.
So as Andrew said, we have suggested that you terminate without just cause. Additionally, we have created a solution that we recommend to you that is a three-part tactical plan. We call this the 3 C's of construct. The first C is improving your corporate culture. The second C is improving your online communication. And the third C is encouraging your company to engage in community development. In the first C of corporate culture, we recommend you implement a code of ethics. This code of ethics will help align employee behavior with your company's vision and values. Secondly, we recommend you implement social media guidelines. These will help employees distinguish between appropriate personal, professional, and corporate online behavior. We recommend these are implemented into written formal contracts for your employees to sign. We also recommend you have a 1-day workshop where you go through the details of each contract and ensure that your employees understand the details to which they are signing. This will help build trust. As terminating Connor is somewhat unexpected, some of your employees may feel slightly distrusting of you, and this will really just set expectations for future behavior to ensure that trust and confidence in you as their employer. Our second C is online communication. We recommend you create an online presence for your company. Building a community page will allow you to clearly communicate your mission and values, therefore setting an example as leadership from the top for your employees to follow your communication of your values. We want your employees to engage in social media use. It's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's a very valuable tool to you and your employees to transparently showcase your skills and abilities. Encourage your employees to create LinkedIn profiles and create one for your company as well, where you can show your valuable experience and create a positive image for your company. Without doing this, you run the risk of creating an online association with the negative media that Connor has created. In Searching Right Tech Construction, articles surrounding the issue of Connor is what currently comes up, and we want to build a positive image online through creating a positive presence. Our third C is community spirit. We encourage you to get involved in your community in Delta. Build spirit and create a positive, proactive, long-lasting, sustainable future to build reputational capital and sustainability. Have conversations with your employees. Find individuals that are currently engaged in the community. Maybe they're soccer coaches. Maybe they're involved in fundraising initiatives. Find out if there's anything that you as a company and the remainder of your employees can support these individuals. We've also identified 2 Delta community initiatives you could also be involved with. This is Burns Bog Maintenance and Delta Canada Celebrations. we have ensured that our recommended solution to you is financially sound. We've identified the tangible costs as well as the intangible costs. Our tangible costs total at $5,200, while our intangible costs are time-related. We've also carefully created a timeline for you. We recommend you act immediately in terminating Connor. Through our recommendation, we've implemented set times, and we've also looked at key success indicators in the bright blue. These are ways to audit the success of our recommendation. Through quarterly revenue reviews, as well as getting feedback from your employees about these new changes. We've also looked at the risks and ways to mitigate these risks in our recommendation. The employee distrust is definitely a risk that we have carefully considered, and this is why the workshops are vitally important to help rebuild that trust and create set expectations so your employees understand these changes, as well as sabotage by Connor. Carefully communicate his termination to him and put careful care into your severance package to ensure the minimization of this possibility. Lastly, another risk we have identified of our recommendation is the need to replace Connor in time to meet a workload. So we recommend that you do hire quickly. We, Dark Horse Consulting, do understand this very, very unfortunate situation that you're in. It's a right versus right battle, and there isn't an easy solution. So we have taken good, careful care in creating a recommendation for you that will help guide the decision-making to move forward into a sustainable future with reputational growth and build goodwill. Social media is part of our everyday use of communication. It's a valuable tool, but it also raises many potential hazards and harms. And it's important that your employees understand that they are right tech employees online and offline.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced today with an unfortunate and precarious situation, and there's no real textbook solution as to how to proceed forward, and there's no real dichotomy in what is right and what is wrong. We, Dark Horse Consulting, are confident that our construct strategy, while ensuring the success of the business in the future and maintaining the balance of the needs of the stakeholders, will protect reputational capital through a proactive risk mitigating strategy for future success. Now, on June 15th, we saw Vancouver at its lowest, and many employers, including yourself, really face a challenge of moving forward in this. And we believe that Right Tech Construction, you have the opportunity here to move forward into a successful future and showcase the best